We're broadcasting live here. Gonna let people file in as they want. Now we have our first attendees filing in. We'll give everyone a minute to come on board and get settled before we get everything started. I'd hate to have anyone miss out on anything. But everyone seems to be joining rather quickly, which is great. I always appreciate all the attendees who are ready and waiting and willing to go.
Fantastic.
We'll give everyone just another minute and then we'll kick things off.
This is just water, it's not beer, okay?
Okay. Well, it's a couple minutes after the hour. Why don't we get started? Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Rob Burnett. I'm with Netcapital, and today we have Nick and Juka of Neurotez joining us. Nick and Juka, thanks for joining.
You're very welcome.
Pleasure.
Pleasure to be here.
And so just so everyone knows who's attending, we've got some prepared questions that I'm going to ask Nick and Juka to kind of dig into Neurotez and help us better understand what the investment opportunity is. Neurotez is currently raising capital on netcapital.com. If any attendees have questions throughout the event, there's a Q&A function down at the bottom of your Zoom webinar link. Please feel free to type in questions and I'll ask them kind of as appropriate along the way. So with that, Nick and Juka, again, thanks for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
So Nick, why don't we just kick it off? Why don't you just give us a brief overview of Neurotez? What do you guys do, and what's next?
Okay, absolutely. I could start by saying that Neurotez started or was incorporated in 2005. It was kind of a spin-off from Columbia University, which was my last academic post. And we started off based on very encouraging data that we had with the asset we are exploring as a potential therapy for Alzheimer's disease. And decided perhaps a better setting will be a company rather than an academic setting, which is more focused towards research and discovery rather than research and development. And we focused on raising some non-dilutive capital to begin with. We were successful in raising between 4 and 5 million from a number of grant sources, primarily NIH through the SBIR mechanism, but also some other smaller grant awarding bodies like New Jersey State. We also got some money from the IRS. Recently we started exploring private investors a bit more intensely. The fact that we are a life sciences company focused on developing a drug for Alzheimer's disease that requires substantial capital to execute the clinical trials that are required for approval of the drug. We started exploring the private investors, high net worth individuals, family offices. Netcapital was, in a way, a natural choice for us because we were funded up until now with non-dilutive capital, and we thought perhaps the transition through retail investors that can support early stage companies would be a good way for us to proceed. And here we are now raising money to do essentially the clinical trials that we need, and also talking to a number of potential investors. The company, in addition to its primary asset, leptin for Alzheimer's disease, which we are currently advertising Netcapital raise or offering, has a number of early stage opportunities in addition to a few screening platforms that could potentially discover new assets, new molecular entities, focused, all of them in central nervous system disorders. That's our focus as a company, to develop drugs for unmet medical needs in the CNS field.
Great. I'm looking forward to, am I getting a little feedback? There we go. I think that's better. Looking forward to digging into the different central nervous system solutions you guys have. Before we dive into the actual drugs you're developing and the product itself, can you tell me a little bit about you and the team you've put together at Neurotez that are developing these drugs and different solutions?
Okay, so I haven't met a company yet that would say that they've assembled a bad team. Nonetheless, we really truly have exceptional individuals within our group. They're all part of the mosaic that constitute a company that makes it a great company focused in Alzheimer's disease. And you'll find more details about each and one of us on one hand in our neurotez.com website, in addition to details about the individuals in our group at the Netcapital Neurotez website and the offering statement that we submitted to the SEC. But I'd like to start with two academics that are part of the team, essentially key opinion leaders in the field. George Perry and Dr. Ashford. Dr. Perry is a professor at University of Texas in San Antonio, and also editor of major Alzheimer's disease journals. He is a highly prolific scholar and researcher with 1,000 publications and 10,000 citations. We're very honored and happy to have him in our team. Dr. Ashford, who's part of Stanford University and the VA affairs in Palo Alto, has been working on Alzheimer's disease ever since before the first approval of Alzheimer's drug in the market. So this is decades of research. He is also very committed in identifying a solution for Alzheimer's disease, which is missing currently. There's nothing really that can address the disease in terms of therapeutics. Also, there is people that are representing the world from the business field, like James Harris, who's also an entrepreneur, was the VP of a company that did biosimilars, biologics, recombinant proteins. Happy to have him in our team. A major addition recently by Hamish MacArthur, 33 years of experience with Pfizer, particularly focused in microbial biochemistry. That's important because our drug is in fact a recombinant protein that can be produced in E. coli with microbial fermentation. There's a unique aspect about being able to produce recombinant proteins in microbial cultures. The fact the protein does not need post-translation modifications. So we don't need mammalian cell lines, which are traditionally much more difficult and more expensive to use as a vehicle to produce recombinant proteins. In addition, I'd like to, Juka perhaps can tell us a few, but I'd like to say that I'm very happy that he's part of the team too. He has extensive experience in clinical trials, all the way up to phase 4 clinical trials, has a number of publications under his belt too. So he's both a very experienced scholar and experienced in delivering clinical trials.
Thank you very much. That was, very well put. I have to say.
Even though he's from Toronto.
Or even that he's from Finland originally.
Oh yes.
Absolutely. Yes, that I don't think I need to add anything to what you just said. It was so comprehensive and so nice support.
All right.
Anyhow, I've been also managing some neurological projects for different types of indications in neurology for US and Canadian and European markets.
Yeah, his experience goes beyond neurology, but he has done extensive work in it.
That's right.
Jane Johnston, VP of Operations, has been a major contributor in some of the research and development work that we did soon after Columbia University. She's part of that team and remains an academic. Michael Hoy is a consultant in Reg Affairs. He has worked for a number of big companies, including Bristol Myers Squibb, Wyeth, and Johnson & Johnson. He's a great friend and colleague and provides useful input regarding the Reg Affairs. It's a very unique project, so we heavily depend on his expert opinion. And finally, I'd like to mention two fairly new additions. Bob Oliver, who is representing the big pharma world. He used to be recently the president and CEO of Otsuka, one of the biggest Japanese companies and global conglomerate. And we are honored to have him on our team. He is a well-respected businessman and also very keen in identifying an Alzheimer's disease drug that's missing right now on the market. I mentioned James Harrison. Finally, Thomas Humphreys, another expert in clinical studies with 36 years in big pharma, retired as a colonel after 26 years in the Navy and Air Force. His last biopharmaceutical company was Bayer. In addition to these are part of mainly through the management team, with the exception of Thomas Humphreys and Bob Oliver. We have a bunch of advisors that have been very supportive in our work and have been instrumental in shaping the strategy and the business model that we currently are trying to execute. And for more information, I don't want to spend more time in, all these guys' heads will get bigger and bigger if I could continue talking about them. But they're really, really not only exceptionally brilliant as business people and scientists, but they're also very nice people to be working with me. So,
great. Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Sure.
I appreciate the overview of everyone on the team. As before we dive into the actual products you're producing, can you talk to me a little bit about the problem you're trying to solve? I know you're working with the central nervous system and Alzheimer's in particular, but talk to us a little bit about kind of what are the issues surrounding those diseases and their treatments and what you're trying to do to be different.
Well, there's a number of issues in the CNS field overall that make it particularly difficult in identifying new pharmaceutical entities, but with Alzheimer's disease even more so, and this is the focus I'd like to keep. Only because our primary asset is an Alzheimer's drug. We have not had an approval for this disorder for the last 15, 16 years. And the drugs that are currently available in the market are only symptomatic relief medicines with very limited period of efficacy, which is very, very mild. So there's a huge unmet medical need because it affects a large number of people. In the US alone, there's estimates for 5 million with Alzheimer's disease diagnosed. And if you look at the global scale, we're looking at least 30 million. There's something like 40 or more million with dementia. Alzheimer's disease is the largest form, is the most common form of dementia. About 60 to 80% of people with dementia are Alzheimer's cases. So it's a huge problem. So much so that I mentioned in my slide presentation, it is expected that a disease modification entity would represent a $30 billion market opportunity for the entire span of its life as a proprietary drug, according to Goldman Sachs, and with a peak between 11 and 20 billion, meaning for a year, it could reach that figure. So huge unmet medical need, a huge number of people, no drugs available that are meaningful, we believe our drug will make a difference. But it will make a difference not perhaps for the entire Alzheimer's population. It will be addressing a subgroup of those individuals.
And can you talk to us a little bit about like what your drug does and what that subgroup is that you're trying to address?
Right. So we believe that all the efforts that primarily failed, even at late stage phase 3 clinical trials, were in their majority focused on removing A beta, which is one of the hallmarks of the disease, the major proteinaceous component found in plaques, which are the pathological lesions in Alzheimer's brain. Another lesion found in Alzheimer's brain is the neurofibrillary tangles, and the major proteination component there is hyperphosphorylated tau. And A beta has been targeted by the majority of programs, and all of those that failed were effectively trying to remove A beta or at least halt its production. That increased skepticism as to whether that dogma was really truly correct. And initially, both of my key opinion leaders, from the beginning, when we started the company, insisted that A beta is not the culprit of the disease. I tried to maintain some form of agnostic position because I knew that our drug was able to reduce the amount of A beta and phospho-tau. However, it's a great possibility that both A beta and phospho-tau are biomarkers or aftermarks of a pathology that underlines the path leading to neurodegeneration and death. And we believed that metabolic pathways are compromised in Alzheimer's brain, and a phenomenon that precedes both A beta and phospho-tau formation. So our product, our drug candidate, it's not a product yet, improves metabolic pathways, and as a result, we can see an improvement in A beta and phospho-tau levels. And we've seen it in cell culture models, we've seen it in animal models, and backed with epidemiological studies that indicate low leptin levels are associated with Alzheimer's disease, or are at risk, or increase your risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, gives us confidence that this is going to be a very meaningful therapeutic target, therapeutic entity, and deserves full attention and full-blown support for clinical development.
And speaking of clinical, where along the timeline are you at this point with the compound?
Okay, so a unique aspect of the product, or the drug candidate, I keep saying product.
Yeah, the drug candidate.
Drug candidate, is that it is a repurposed drug. It has already been approved for general lipodystrophy. This is an extra orphan drug indication, represented by about 300 patients in the US. So as a result, we have a defined path in moving through the IND enabling studies that usually involves some tox studies with animals, and even phase 1 studies, which are safety studies using healthy individuals. So even though on paper we are a preclinical stage company, we are effectively phase 2 ready. Okay, because the part we may have to, we more than likely will be able to streamline some of the studies that are required until we get to phase 2, but it's going to be based on what the FDA will agree with us in what we have to do to get there. But they don't want to, the FDA wouldn't approve killing more animals unnecessarily. These are data already there. But there's a
yes, just a comment you can hear. Yes, as this is a very well-known compound and a protein has been used for different indications in the past and over the many years. There could also be a regulatory pathway. I don't know, Nick, if it was discussed with FDA, but as a 505(b)(2) approach under the 505(b)(2) approval pathway, which is quite straightforward and simple, and of course the fast track as well, because of the very huge unmet need that companies have failed to bring any good therapies to treat Alzheimer's.
Right. So the fast track, effectively, and we are jumping a little bit, ahead of time, would be able to more or less use a well-designed and executed phase 2 clinical trial as a trial for approval, or at least conditional approval, allowing the entry of the compound in the market to be followed by phase 4 post-marketing studies. So that effectively, if everything goes right, and if we get the FDA to agree with our strategy, we can be in the market in 4 years, which is phenomenal for a drug that is effectively, preclinical right now.
That would be my next question, timeline to market. Along those lines, for Neurotez as a company, how do you intend to drive revenue? Is the plan to eventually make it to market and sell the drug? Is your plan to maybe move to a larger, become a part of a larger division?
It did come up as a question in the Netcapital dialogue that we had. What are your exit plans? And we are prepared for all sorts of different scenarios. Beginning from, we could even get acquired the next few months from a public company right now and become, the investment will, provide the investors liquidity. However, as we hit the different milestones down the value chain, the more our value will increase, justifying a better return for the investor. As we hit phase 1, we become a much more valued company. When we continue phase 2, the same. After that, it really depends on what FDA will agree as an approval path. We can easily, with the people that we have right now and the resources hopefully provided to us through the investors, can deliver phase 2 easily. Beyond phase 2, if the FDA agrees, we can take it to market with, collaborating with the appropriate consulting groups. But if we need to do a phase 3 trial, this would be the perfect opportunity for us to hand it over to a larger partner. A perfect opportunity for, talking to the Biogens and the Lillys, et cetera. They only, incidentally, look at phase 2 trial opportunities, particularly for Alzheimer's disease. And, all depends on how well that phase 2 is going to be, how well executed in the results of the phase 2.
And looking down the road, we have our first. Go ahead.
I would like to add, if we, for example, can continue ourselves, an IPO is not unreasonable after a phase 1, phase 1B. We can become, it's not unreasonable in the life sciences, particularly in the Alzheimer's field. A number of companies did either do a reverse merger with an empty shell or a full-blown IPO. And then again, that will also provide an exit and a possibility for investors to see a return.
Great. We do first question from an investor on the participating here. What will the course of treatment be for an individual patient before experiencing the benefits you expect? And do you have an estimate of the cost to the patient?
Okay, so to address the cost, as a recombinant protein, it's usually a little bit more expensive than small compounds. It would be. But because it is produced in E. coli, without the need of the use of a mammalian cell line, it can be considerably cheaper compared to, for example, recombinant proteins like antibodies that do need the full panoply of a mammalian cell line. Now, antibodies are typically, based on some of the commercially available antibodies addressing major disorders, cost between 40 and 50,000 a year per patient, and involve, and that's not particularly user-friendly, involve a visit to a medical site and infusion, sometimes for hours, periodically throughout the year. In our case, we are dealing with a protein, a therapeutic that will be injected subcutaneously and can easily be done by the patient itself. It won't need a visit to a medical site. It won't even need the help of a nurse or a helper, particularly as our main target, or the group that we intend to provide therapeutic for, or we anticipate responding favorably better than any other, the early stage hypoleptinemics and genetically predisposed individuals. So there's another component or a mix in our strategy that is unique and novel compared to other opportunities. We intend to address that subgroup, which is characterized by low leptin, specifically the first quartile. You know, if you are in the bottom quartile of leptin levels, you're a good candidate. And because it is early stage, we think the earlier you start, the more likely you're going to be successful with a disease modification approach. And because in the early stage it's a little bit more difficult to identify Alzheimer's cases versus other dementias, to secure those that are genetically predisposed with a very cost-effective and practically easily administered genetic test that involves analysis of a group of SNPs, and that will provide a score and your likelihood of getting Alzheimer's disease. This genomic test we're doing in collaboration with Cytox, a company out of Oxford in the UK. And we're very excited because it's a unique approach, not only because a test can be used to define whether you are predisposed to Alzheimer's disease, but it will also refine our strategy and our approach in identifying the right patients for our trials. So that's really the cost we anticipate. I know it was part of the question. It would really, it's not something we can put a price tag on yet. All I know is that the cost of goods for our recombinant protein are going to be much smaller compared to mammalian produced proteins, and therefore the cost of the patient, etc., is going to be much lower to those compounds. Perhaps even, a quarter of what you usually pay for those expensive proteins. But this is, it also depends on, how well it will address the disease. I mean, if it's a very effective drug, perhaps the price is going to be different versus, a mild effect.
Thanks for that. So we're coming towards the end of the time. If anyone else on the phone has questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A slot now. Otherwise, Nick and Juka, anything else you want investors to know as they consider, the opportunity of investing in Neurotez?
First of all, we'd love to thank, I don't know if among the audience are any individuals that already invested and are looking to see what we're up to. We'd like to thank those that did invest. I'd like to thank Netcapital for providing the infrastructure and the platform. It has, worked without a glitch. It runs very smoothly at all levels. They also, the Netcapital group, were instrumental in the presentation itself. So we appreciate all that input and help. And also to reach out to if any of the audience are people that are considering an investment, to reach out and invest. The more we will need substantial capital, and we appreciate those that participate.
And we
just
do
just a comment from me. Having been involved in development and bringing to the markets 2025 different types of products, and for through the different regulatory pathways in many different countries, and given the fact that there is so much evidence on this particular compound, leptin, in its prospective efficacy in treatment of Alzheimer's, not only treatment of the Alzheimer's symptoms, but perhaps also in terms of in reversing the Alzheimer's the status from severe stages in the disease to milder stages. So the reversal is a very interesting hypothetical possibility. But given all the data that has been created with this particular compound, data is very strong and very suggestive that this particular treatment might be the one that would benefit millions and millions of people with Alzheimer's disease in the world.
Thanks, Judah. We did have one more question from the audience. Nick, how much are you currently raising, and what do you plan on using the funds for that will allow you to raise future capital at a higher price?
With Netcapital, we're raising 2.5 million. It's a combination of the crowdfunding and 506c type of offering, which essentially allows both accredited and non-accredited investors to participate. We state in our slide presentation that we're going to need about 5 million to get the IND. More than likely, it's going to be lower than that. We have identified a CDMO, which is a contract development and manufacturing organization that could accept a deal that would involve them providing the drug to us and accepting a deferred payment, meaning that we can reach at the IND level and even do some phase 1 trials with a lower amount of the 5 million that we initially stated in our slide presentation. And when we become a clinical stage company, the valuation of the company increases tremendously. We are doing this raise right now with a pre-money valuation of 22. After a phase 1, it's not unreasonable, according to the data available from other opportunities and companies out there. The company's value will increase 2 to 3-fold. And I mentioned after a phase 1B, we could be a very good candidate for an IPO if we were to continue the work ourselves. Excuse me. And needless to say, and emphasize that we could also be targets or offers from larger companies that are in the public domain already. So roughly, based on data, after phase 1B, the company becomes between 30 and 50 million. After a phase 2, with good phase 2 data, it's not unreasonable to make this statement. The company becomes of value north of 500 million easily. It's the stage of a company that is a target of big pharma offers or big investors, private equity groups, or high net worth individuals that would support the team to take it all the way to approval into an option. So,
great. Thank you for taking the time, both Nick and Yuka. We appreciate it. For everyone participating, I left a link to Neurotez's offering page on Netcapital in the chat function. You can also find them on netcapital.com if you're interested in investing. If anyone has additional questions for Neurotez, you can post on their discussion board on the Netcapital website. And if anyone has questions about Netcapital, you can email me directly at rob.burnett@netcapital.com. My email address is also in the Zoom invite. So again, Nick and Yuka, thanks for joining us.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for tuning in and watching. This recording will be available on YouTube as well shortly after we're done.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.